Fire Eyes Media.
One of the reasons that we do the WTF episodes is because comedy is cheaper than therapy, and not everyone makes good choices, and we get to get a little hit of free dopamine laughing at their expense, or with them in some cases. However, the WTF actually stands for what it sounds like. What the fuck? And sometimes there are things that you just stumble on that make you say, what in the actual fuck? Today's episode is just that. A glimpse into our past of something that clearly wouldn't fly today. With good reason.
It's no mystery that humanity has made some questionable decisions in the name of science for the sake of progress and learning. But where is the line drawn? Before we dive into all of that and get the WTFs flowing, let's hear our riddle for the day. I can be real or imagined, and I can follow you everywhere. What am I? Stay tuned to the end to find out the answer. And if you like what you hear from our creepy little corner of chaos today, it would really mean the world to us if you could leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to us from, as it really helps us keep bringing you all the WTFs.
All right, let's talk about a name you've definitely heard before. Ivan Pavlov. You know, the guy with the dogs and the bells. The one responsible for making us all associate Pavlov with drooling canines? Yeah, that guy. Most people know the cute version of this story. Pavlov figured out that dogs could be trained to salivate at the sound of a bell because they associated it with food. So cute, right? Just a scientist playing a little mind game with his furry friends. But here's the part they don't tell you in psychology class. Pavlov's experiment? Way less cute than you think.
Pavlov was actually studying digestion, not doggy brain tricks. He noticed that his lab dogs would start salivating before they even got their food, just at the sight of the assistant who fed them. They had learned to associate the lab assistant with food. Naturally, Pavlov decided to take this a step further. He started ringing a bell, or, well, actually, a metronome, before feeding the dogs. Eventually, the dogs learned that the metronome equals food, and they started salivating just from the sound, even when no food appeared. This, my friends, is classical conditioning, a learning process where a neutral stimulus, like a bell or metronome, gets linked to something like food, creating an automatic response like salivation. Sounds like a fascinating, low-stakes experiment, right? Just a bunch of dogs happily drooling away in a cozy Russian lab. Yeah? No.
He was initially interested in the effect of eating on pancreatic, gastric, and salivary excretions. He wanted to measure their gastric juices precisely. And how did he do that? Oh, you know, just by removing their esophagus and creating holes in their throats. If you could see Gina's face, that's the first time she's learned this information.
Oh, God.
That's right. He surgically altered his lab dogs, giving them fistulas, aka holes in their digestive tracts, so that when they ate, the food wouldn't even make it to their stomachs. Instead, it just fell right out of their necks. This allowed him to collect and study gastric juices without the inconvenience of, digestion happening. Oh, wait, it gets even better. Or worse, I guess. Anyway, Pavlov wasn't just collecting gastric juices for science. Oh, no. He was selling it. He actually sold dog gastric juices in Russia, France, and Germany as a cure for indigestion. Because apparently, in the early 1900s, people thought, you know what would really help my upset stomach? Some secondhand dog gastric juices.
Okay, well, my stomach is feeling very upset right now at the thought of ingesting a dog's gastric juices. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I am disturbed. Whew. And how did he collect all this gastric gold? Well, he had what he called his gastric juice factory, which was just 5 large dogs harnessed to a crossbeam and attached to a container by a tube coming out of their fistulas. They were positioned at an angle facing a bowl of minced meat, which they would eat, except, of course, the food never actually made it to their stomachs. It just fell out of their necks into a collection plate. Meanwhile, their stomachs were kept functional by manually inserting food directly into them. Because, don't worry, Pavlov made sure his dogs stayed healthy while he harvested their bodily fluids for profit. Oddly enough, in a physiology publication, it was said the dogs enjoyed these experiments, that they enthusiastically jumped into their stands before their hours-long meals. Oh, sure, they loved it. Nothing dogs enjoy more than being turned into a living juice dispenser, right?
Unsurprisingly, these dogs didn't last long. Pavlov wrote about one dog that he called Extraordinary, who died just 10 days after surgery. He noted that their passionate desire to study the dog further was foiled by its untimely death. Oh, and what did the dog die from? Extended starvation and a series of wounds. You don't say. So, while all of this gruesome research was happening, Pavlov stumbled upon his biggest psychological discovery: the dogs starting to drool just at the sight of their lab assistant's white coat. And that's when it clicked. This was more than just digestion research. This was about behavior.
I'm so upset right now. And so he started using the metronome, not a bell, as we were led to believe. He conditioned the dogs to salivate at the sound, even when there was no food. And just like that, classical conditioning was born. This work earned him the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1904. Not for the whole teaching dogs to associate sounds with food thing, but for his work on digestion. But let's be real. His real legacy is making us all rethink the phrase Pavlov's dogs. Because now, when you hear it, you won't just think of happy, drooling pups. You'll think of surgical fistulas, dog saliva factories, and one of the weirdest side hustles in scientific history. You're welcome.
I'm so sorry.
They definitely did not teach you that side of Pavlov's dogs in school. No, they really
didn't. No. And it wasn't just like one fistula like in their throat. There was the fistula in their throat where the food came out. And then there were other fistulas along their digestive tract so he could study the levels of the excretions of the gastric juices as it goes further down the digestive system.
Do you think that anybody would get a Nobel Prize these days for doing experiments like that on animals?
No, because we do have this thing called like morals and ethics for the most part these days. So, you know, which leads us to the next thing. All right, let's talk about a psychology experiment that sounds like it was cooked up by a Bond villain. except it was real and it happened at Johns Hopkins University between 1919 and 1920. It's called the Little Albert Experiment, and it was run by a psychologist, John B. Watson, and his graduate assistant / partner in crime, Rosalie Rayner. Now, Watson was a big fan of Pavlov's work, but he wanted to take it a step further. He looked at Pavlov's dogs and said, "Hold my beaker, let's try this on a human." He wanted to see if he could condition fear in a human, because why not, right? So Watson and Rayner came up with 3 big questions. 1, can you condition a baby to fear an animal by pairing it with a loud, scary noise? 2, would that fear transfer to other animals or objects? And 3, how long would the fear last? And naturally, they needed a test subject. Enter little Albert, a baby. A literal baby.
Now, according to one source, Watson and Rayner did get permission from Albert's mother before using her baby as their personal science experiment. But this was the early 1900s, when research ethics basically meant don't set your test subjects on fire. So take that with a grain of salt. Albert was just 9 months old when they started testing him. First, they wanted to see what he was naturally afraid of. So they showed him all kinds of random stuff. A white rat, a rabbit, a dog, a monkey, masks, both with and without hair, because science, I guess. Cotton wool, burning newspapers, normal baby toys. And Albert, 0 fear. The kid was chill. None of these things freaked him out. Not even the burning newspaper, which honestly should have. Fast forward 2 months. Albert is now 11 months old, and this is when things got messed up. Watson and Rayner brought out the white rat again, but this time they paired it with a loud, fear-inducing noise, a hammer striking a steel bar right behind Albert's head. Yeah, real subtle. That would be scary on its own.
They repeated this lovely little setup 7 times over 2 separate sessions. And wouldn't you know it, it worked. Albert went from happily playing with the rat to completely losing it at the mere sight of it. No noise needed. Just the rat alone made him cry and scramble to get away. Watson and Rayner later described it like this. The instant the rat was shown, the baby began to cry. Almost instantly, he turned sharply to the left, fell over on his side, raised himself on all 4s, and began to crawl away so rapidly that he was caught with difficulty before reaching the edge of the table. Okay, hold on. Edge of the table. They were doing this on a raised surface. It's good to know that terrifying the child wasn't enough. They also threw in a little risk of head trauma for good measure. But hey, science!
I mean, you got to add a little more to the experiment.
God.
I guess. We've learned so much. We've learned so much over time.
It's like kind of like bleeding and like bleeding together. Like all of the, like I'm running out of room in my head. I'm going to have to start like dumping shit to make room for more so it doesn't bleed.
Like, I don't know. I don't know which one that was from. It's all just blending together into one large piece of information. I get that. Yeah. So now that Albert was successfully scared of the white rat, Watson and Rayner wanted to see if his fear would generalize, meaning would he also be scared of other things that looked kind of like the rat? Short answer, yes. Albert became afraid of anything white and fluffy. Rabbits, dogs, even Watson himself when he put on a Santa Claus beard. That's right. They gave this kid a full-blown Christmas phobia. Jolly old St. Nick? Terrifying. After the conditioning sessions, they kept testing Albert over the next month to see if the fear stuck. They found that while it did start to fade a little over time, it could be rekindled just by repeating the loud noise plus rat combo again. Watson and Rayner had actually planned to decondition Albert and reverse the fear they instilled in him, but Albert's mother pulled him out of the experiment before they could. So yeah, they just sent this baby off into the world, still terrified of white, fluffy things.
So what happened to little Albert? For decades, Albert's identity remained a mystery. But in 2009, a researcher named Hall P. Beck and his team claimed they had finally figured out who he was, a boy named Douglas Merritt. Turns out, Douglas passed away at the age of 6 due to hydrocephalus, a condition he had been born with, where fluids build up in the brain. Which also means he may not have even been the healthy infant Watson and Rayner had originally described. Then, in 2014, another team of researchers threw a wrench into that theory, presenting evidence that little Albert was actually a boy named William, who went by his middle name, Albert, born on the exact same day as Merritt to a mother who worked at the same hospital.
To this day, psychologists still argue about which of these two boys was actually little Albert. But one thing's for sure. Whoever he was, he left a lasting impact on psychology. Because thanks to this experiment, we now know fear can be learned, phobias can be conditioned, and apparently, you can do all of this to a baby and still call it science. Seriously, though, Watson and Rayner's work was hugely influential. It laid the foundation for modern behavioral psychology, influenced treatments for phobias, and gave us way too much insight into why some of us are irrationally terrified of certain things. But at the end of the day, it's also a textbook example of why we now have ethics in psychological research. Because if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be out here traumatizing babies for science.
I mean, so because of this experiment, there has been a lot of things like now, informed consent is huge. You have to know and understand every single possibility of complications, what exactly they're doing. Like it has to be, it's super big. And obviously it should be, but back in the 1920s, they just kind of got to do what, they do because there wasn't really a precedent for it. There wasn't anything to go by. So they were just kind of, that's how we do evolve, is through stuff like this.
You got to learn to grow, but
still crazy that this is one of the lessons.
I know. I wonder what spurred his mother to pull him from the experiment.
So his mother was a nurse at the children's hospital there. And anything that I found, anything that I read, it wasn't that she pulled him from the experiment. It wasn't like, okay, we're done with this. She left the hospital.
Got it.
So she was gone. They were done. So
I wonder if they really did have a way to decondition him.
So
or if it was just another experiment.
Basically, since they had learned what they did from the conditioning, they were going to kind of just reverse it. So present him with the rat, but without anything scary. Show him the rat, and give a lollipop. Not exactly that, but just like something to give him a positive association with it. And that's how people are kind of conditioned for things. And that's like some people, they have to go through treatments for their phobias and they have to go through that positive association to help lessen that fear.
Dang. Yeah. I understand how it's good for science, but they couldn't have done it with an adult or something and not a small child.
a baby is like a blank slate, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
An adult has already kind of got their phobias and fears
Preconceived,
established.
yeah.
And just because, like, okay, no, fuck you. I'm just scared of the noise. I'm not scared of that thing. Like, it's harder.
Poor Albert.
I know.
Poor sweet baby.
Okay, we've talked about the Little Albert experiment, which basically was just a crash course on how to traumatize a baby for science. But trust me, psychologists didn't stop there. Over the years, there have been a ton of other experiments that make you go, wait, they actually did that? And some were even worse than what happened to poor little Albert. One that I didn't touch on here, but something that really struck out was called the Monster Study. It was an experiment performed on 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939 about stuttering. The thesis was to induce stuttering in non-stuttering children by telling them that they stuttered, and to stop stuttering in stuttering children by ignoring the stutter and telling the children they spoke fine. Very, very weird.
What's the deal with the name The Monster Experiment? Do I want to know?
It's just the psychological aspect of what they were subjecting the children to. Like, so
orphans?
The dude never, like, the results were never published, and it was relatively unheard of outside of those that knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they dubbed it the Monster Study in the 40s and 50s. They say that somebody that knew Johnson, the dude that did it, he never published the results due to embarrassment of the experiment conclusions.
Huh. I guess it didn't work out the way he thought it was going to. You're basically just using reverse psychology on them. I mean,
let's see. Most of the non-stuttering children who received negative therapy in the experiment suffered negative psychological effects, and some retained speech problems for the rest of their lives. So I'm pretty sure that's probably why.
Like, cool, you gave these kids more issues than they already had. Way to go.
Yeah.
Wow.
But one of the wildest, most infamous experiments out there has to be the Stanford prison experiment. The Stanford prison experiment. Have you heard of it?
It sounds a little familiar, but I can't remember what it was about.
Well, if you don't know about it, buckle up. Picture this. It's 1971. Stanford University and Philip Zimbardo, affectionately referred to as Dr. Z, decides he wants to answer the question of what happens when you put good people in an evil place? Does humanity win over evil, or does evil triumph? He takes 24 male college students, flips a coin, and randomly assigns them to either be prison guards or prisoners. The Palo Alto, California police then go and actually arrest, like they followed through the whole procedure to make it like real legitimate, arrest these students where they are then locked up in a makeshift prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology building.
Wow, this already sounds really above board. At first, it was all fun and games. The students playing guards were just like, okay, I guess we tell the prisoners what to do. And the prisoners were like, ha, okay, we're in fake jail. Neat. But then things escalated. The guards got real power hungry, real fast. We're talking humiliation, psychological torture, and full-on sadistic behavior. Meanwhile, the prisoners became so miserable that they started showing signs of extreme stress, depression, and helplessness. Oh, and did I mention this was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it got shut down after just 6 days because the whole thing spiraled completely out of control. Yeah. Turns out, if you give ordinary people a little too much authority, they really lean into their inner supervillain. If you want us to do a full episode on that absolute dumpster fire of an experiment, head to our Instagram or website and let us know. So let's circle back to little Albert for a second. What happened to him after Watson and Rayner completely rewired his brain to fear fluffy things? Did he grow out of it, or did his conditioned fear follow him into adulthood? We'll never know for sure, but the experiment definitely proved one thing. Classical conditioning works on humans, and just not in a lab. It happens all the time in real life.
For example, let's say someone grows up in an abusive home where every time they leave the house, something bad happens. Over time, they might develop agoraphobia, a fear of leaving their house at all. And that brings us to a fun little psychology lesson. Fear versus phobia. What's the difference? People love to throw around the word phobia, but let's get one thing straight. A phobia is not just a fear. It's an extreme, irrational fear that interferes with daily life. Like, I used to be afraid of snakes, but then I got one, and then another. And now I have 6 slithery little meat tubes, and we live in perfect harmony. And I do use them frequently to educate others about snakes. I feel that fear sometimes stems from the unknown, and the best way to combat that is by gaining knowledge like I did. But I know someone, and I bet you do too, who will literally hyperventilate at the mention of a snake. Like full on panic attack, fight or flight mode, leave the room like it's on fire reaction. That's a phobia.
Now, since we're on the topic, let's talk about some of the craziest phobias people actually have.
I don't even want to try to pronounce these.
Some of these are wild.
Cyberphobia.
Fear of computers or technology, often experienced by older adults who are having trouble adapting to using new technologies like computers, tablets, or smartphones. I understand this.
Do you really?
I mean, I don't have it. I think I would put my mom on that spectrum.
I kind of, as soon as you started saying that, I was like, okay, if anybody I would think of, it'd possibly your mom, just.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother passed away so long ago before like technology really took off that she might have been. No, I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, no, it's very like it overwhelms her so much. Yeah, like she barely knows how to use her iPhone. So,
hey, at least she has one.
True, but she only uses it literally to call or text. Yeah, that's it.
Trypophobia.
Fear of images with patterns of holes or bumps. Imagine being triggered by bubble wrap or honeycombs.
Those don't bother me. I know some people like it really is like a about face and run the opposite direction when presented with something like that. But no, that doesn't.
It's a little eerie. I think it's more for me. It's like the weird pictures of holes. But it's not. It's like it's uncomfortable, but it's not.
Yeah, it's more uncanny valley than phobia.
Yeah, Corbin does not like stuff like that. I wouldn't say it's a phobia. Like I wouldn't say he's at phobia level, but he definitely does not like it.
Gamophobia.
Fear of marriage. I would be curious to know what caused that.
What made that into? I mean, possibly something like with, their own parents, bad experiences.
Yeah, bad experiences in their childhood and with the people and marriages around them
that they've associated with marriage.
Mm-hmm. I bet there's more people that have that fear than you would think. Yeah.
Chirophobia.
Fear of hands. Interesting. I'm familiar with people who are afraid of feet, but not hands.
Hands are fine. Hands are, little phalangy friends, but like.
How would you go through life being afraid of hands when you have hands?
I don't know. Wear gloves all the time so you wouldn't have to look at them? Like mittens.
Maybe. Like the mitten gloves? Mm-hmm. But then how would you function?
To bust out your inner Zoidberg.
Check it out, y'all. Everyone we invited is here.
Also Zoidberg.
We got to find somebody who's actually afraid of hands and see how they live life day to day, because that's really weird.
It would be very interesting. We joke about it, but like these are all like, I didn't just like, face plant onto the keyboard and make these words up. Like these are legitimate phobias that people have, that people do suffer with. So yeah, it would be interesting to talk with
to figure out how it impacts them on their day to day.
Ablitophobia.
Fear of washing, bathing, or cleaning. Not wanting to bathe may stem from an accident involving water or experiencing abuse as a child that involved water or bathing.
So my friend's son had an incident happen. He was fine. He wasn't at risk for drowning or anything like that, but just something that made him uncomfortable. And then after that, he did not want to take a bath. He did not want the water near his face. He didn't want anything like that. And so, I mean, I totally.
Oh, yeah, because you're scared of it happening again. So that one makes a lot of sense to me for sure.
Okay, we're just going to do a few more. This is the literal one that, like, there's absolutely no amount of anything that can make me try to say it. But, like,
Hippopotomonstrosesquipedaliophobia.
Yeah, that word that you just heard.
Hippopotomonstrosesquipedaliophobia.
Is the fear of long words. Aww. That's just cruel. But it's often brought upon by being laughed at while reading or pronouncing long words, usually in school-age children. So I get it, but whoever created or whoever thought of the phobia name, how many letters is this? 36. It's a 36-letter word.
Yeah, that's messed up.
That's just mean.
I get it, though. It's like being terrified in class that you're going to get called on to read the next passage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. I don't know why they had to make it such a complicated word.
If you have a phobia, you can't even say the phobia because the name of the phobia is what you're afraid of.
Cruel and unusual is what it is.
Oh, man. Okay, so this one.
Lutrophobia.
Fear of otters. Okay, people are afraid of snakes, spiders, scorpions, bears even, but like otters, they're like furry little adorable slinkies. Like, I
think they can be pretty mean though. Like, I think they're pretty aggressive.
I'm just thinking on the scale of if I were cornered in a room with an otter versus a bear.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to pick the furry slinky.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, it might hurt you, but it's going to do way less damage. So,
for sure.
Interesting.
Okay, this next one.
I know.
Pedophobia.
Fear of children. Not going to lie. I might actually have a small case of this already, thanks to classical conditioning from my own children. But like, if you think about it on a serious level, like if you're just out and about living your life and your literal phobia just comes toddling by you like that, like children are not uncommon. Like they're everywhere. That would be terrifying.
So funnily enough, I'm pretty sure a friend of mine's husband has this fear.
Really?
He's very scared of children. He doesn't know how to interact with them, and they make him extremely uncomfortable. And apparently when he was a kid, he didn't even like other kids. He would sit there and read a book or something and would not interact with other kids.
See, that's interesting.
Yeah. I get it. I don't really like other kids besides mine and a few others. So
yeah, like a couple of my friends' kids I'm fine with, and like, some family.
But I think it's more just the responsibility of taking care of someone else's child is the part that I don't like.
That's the thing. Like I can barely keep myself alive, and now I'm responsible for 2 other humans. Who the hell thought that was a good idea?
Right. Yeah. I have enough of a trouble keeping my shit together to take care of my own kids. Yeah.
All right. A couple more.
Globophobia.
The fear of balloons.
Mm.
Sometimes just about the fear of balloons popping, but can also be of the balloons themselves. And apparently, Oprah Winfrey has this phobia.
So I think one of my kids' friends has this.
Really?
And I thought he was kidding. Like, I thought it was a joke, but maybe he really is scared of
No,
phobias.
it's a legitimate thing. Like,
He's also afraid of pickles.
not the pickles.
Like, actually scared of them. I don't know. I don't. What's that called? Pickleophobia?
Okay, last one.
Phobophobia.
Which is the fear of phobias. It kind of like just ties it back to the fear of long words. Like you're gonna give a fear something, a name, something. I don't know.
How can you be afraid of phobias?
Like that's a phobia itself. So you're afraid of the thing that you have. That would just be a terrifying loop.
I feel like you just have really bad anxiety. And you're just scared of things out of your control. And then, so you're scared of being scared of things. I don't know.
Anxiety on steroids.
I don't know. My brain is like the gears are,
grinding. And
Yeah, no.
So, yeah, whether it's Santa Claus beards, white rats, or peanut butter, our brains are really good at developing fears that make zero sense. But one thing's for sure, if psychology has taught us anything, it's that fear is powerful, it's learned, and sometimes it sticks with you for life.
It would be really interesting, like we said, to be able to get a deeper insight into people's minds that have phobias and what it was that triggered them or what happened in their lives that made them start being afraid of certain things.
How it affects, like how they're able to function daily. So, hey, if anybody listening, if you've got one of these fun phobias, first off, I apologize.
Yes.
But hey, reach out if you ever feel comfortable in sharing that with us. It would be interesting to know.
Absolutely. As a sociology, psychology girl back in the day, I'm always interested in learning how people's brains work, especially as somebody with severe anxiety. I have all the sympathy in the world. And whoever came up with the word for the fear of long words was obviously feeling very mischievous that day. It's like, let's make this fun. It's really cruel and unusual.
It really is.
It really is.
I'm going to have like nightmares about that word. I can see me just trying to pronounce that word instilled a fear in me. Like I can see where that translated into, for children and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm all for that sort of comedy, but just, man, cruel.
It really is.
Okay, before we say goodbye, let's hear that riddle one more time. I can be real or imagined, and I can follow you everywhere. What am I? The answer? Fear. Let us know if you got it. I really do try to make these riddles relevant to what we're talking about to, give a little bit of a hint. If you like these riddles or have one of your own, share them with us.
And until next time, stay safe.
And make good choices. Bye. Hippopotamustrosa quit. I'm not even halfway done with the word.